in a kind of, and I suppose in a non-scientific term, joining up some dots, right? So what I'm going to do is we're going to spend the time looking at some photographs and then come back and forward to some videos. Now, it'll all depend on the humor of me and what works and what doesn't work. We'll work that, but I've got a good stock of photographs ready to show you. So I'm going to start off first and share my screen with you. And I'm going to share my screen and I hope you can all see it there. That's a practice that I have. I have been, I suppose, I come through collecting folklore through a different angle, through film and art from a rural background here in County Wexford. And I suppose I started to turn the camera on people and people's lives back in the late 90s using video camera because there were tools that I had. And I suppose what I want to do is I'm going to show you some examples of that now in a while. But that's a really important part of a practice that I have. And I suppose that's all I can do. I can stand over the content that I have and the people who I meet and what people tell me, and they're my sources. And to me, sources are absolutely so important in this area of work. And so what I've been doing for the last 20 some years is recording, collecting, and the only use a really important word there. We use the word share. And share was a word that I was doing in my practice before there was ever a button on social media. And it was basically collecting, recording, and sharing the content back to the communities where you got the material, not taking it and putting it in libraries. Well, there was nothing wrong with that either, but not taking it and just taking it away and just as a form of research, but actually forming new conversations and getting the people to talk and think and raise questions around the content that you could be working on. So it's a very, very wide practice, but a huge interest in people, huge interest in place, and a huge interest in people's stories and their own natural voices. And I suppose video has helped that. One thing actually, when I mentioned video, even just to let you, even before I'd always encourage people, especially if you come away from a very general talk here with me about Christmas folklore, I'd love you to even consider it yourselves, the own people in your own lives, your own family, maybe your own neighbours. Take out that mobile phone over Christmas and talk to them about their Christmas experiences and what they did. And this is my setup at the moment. It's literally a mobile phone, a very cheap microphone and a cheap tripod system. And I could have a big camera, but that's what I would use most of the time. And one of the things you touched on is the folklore.ie page that I'd run on Facebook. It's been an absolutely powerful tool in the last 6 years for me for sharing this content. And this content was never in a situation where it wouldn't have been shown on our big broadcasters. It wouldn't have been shown either through TG4 or RT because the production levels were very different. But what it has meant for me over the last number of years is to be able to record, collect and share stuff and use this as a tool to get information back. And that's what's really, really key to this practice. Again, like who would have thought it 3 years ago that I'd be sitting in Wexford and talking to you in County Clare or wherever you are, right? That's what's really magic. And just to show you, there's a massive appetite for the local. There's a huge, huge interest in the local in Ireland at the moment. I suppose that there's practitioners on the ground like myself, and there's more people like myself and have worked it on you and you're doing yourselves. It's this idea. So there is a huge appetite for this content, and that's all I can say to you, right? So what I'm going to do actually, before I even started this evening to prepare to talk, was I'm just going to mention this. It's a thing called the Irish Dresser and Folklore Calendar. I produced it. This is my 3rd year in a row. And what's really interesting for me is I actually use it. Before I started this talk, I actually went to my own calendar and basically I have little folklore dates, but 140 Irish folklore dates or Irish related folklore dates. And now I can go, okay, now I can talk about the month of December, right? So that's what I'm doing with G tonight, right? But before I even start about the month of December, I suppose, come here. This is a snap at the hills where I live, right? And over here, the sun sets on the 21st of the winter solstice, and over here, the sun sets on the summer solstice. So sun and light has always been important. And I will notice, and you'll probably notice yourselves as well, that sun, like we're coming into the depths of winter, we're coming into the dark of winter. That's where Christmas is coming from. And the sun will set here on the summer solstice, and then sadly, it'll make it all the way back over here, and then it'll set here come the 21st of December, give or take, right? So it's a really interesting thing for yourselves, or if you've got children, just to watch where the sun sets on that day, watch where it sets exactly 6 months to far side. So one part of the year, and St. John's Eve, which is a very big tradition in Galway, Mayo, and Clare, and here in Wexford, not as strong, but it's still there, where we mark the sun at its highest. And now we're coming up to Christmas, we're marking the sun at its lowest. And that's what we've been doing through different forms of our megalithic structures over the years, from Knockrow in Kilkenny, Tipperary to Newgrange, or to different sites in Brittany as well, as not just in Ireland, where we've been marking the movement and tracking the movement of the sun. One thing which so sun and light has always been important at this time of year. So what's really interesting is I'm not going to go into kind of textbook folklore with you. I'll go into real stuff with you. And here's one thing which is lovely, is fire and light was always really important. And there was always a strong, especially in Northern European countries, a strong Yule log tradition. So that's why we have our Christmas rolls and our Yule logs and all that goes with that. But I was up in a neighbour's house there about 7 years ago, a woman called Bridget Buckley. And here wasn't she telling me that I just arrived and her neighbour had come around and gave her Christmas block. And it's a very strong tradition in that part of Wexford where they still gift each other bags of sticks at Christmas in the lead up to Christmas. So it's a lovely, lovely, lovely tradition, absolutely tied right back to this idea of the Yule log, tied right back to the idea of having a big roaring fire running in your house from Christmas Eve to Christmas Day and over the course of Christmas. Really important. And also on a very, very practical level, having a big roaring fire and having all the sticks in. Like I was up in Rosscrea there 2 weeks ago, we recorded 2 women, and I spent 50 minutes recording and I never left Christmas. They just talked about Christmas for me. And one of the things which you get, and this was back in the 1950s, and my own mother and them did it as well, they were cooking on the open fire. And the fire was so important because if you were going to have your goose or whatever you were going to eat that following day on Christmas Day, you would have to have a big fire set. So fire was always important. So I'm going to let you listen to Bridget talking here rather than me talking, just to hear her accent and just to hear her telling you about the Christmas block. He says, and if I can find it now, I'll be a right lad. And if I can't find it, I'll have to move on swiftly. Do you know what? I've got a different video of Bridget there. So I'm not going to let, oh, here it is. Here she is. Hang on. Here she is. I just want to let you hear her voice.
Bridget, what is it you're holding in your hand?
My Christmas block. There was a tradition around in this area that people gave each other blocks of sticks, wood for the fire at Christmas time. And like it started off with a small block, but then people used to give bags of blocks. And now I'm lucky enough to get a lot of blocks for as a Christmas present. And it's just a tradition at the moment, at that time.
And everyone give.
Yeah, well, you're giving to certain people who wouldn't have maybe timber or like, you know, say older people living in maybe in town that didn't have a way of getting out and getting blocks. You give them a bag of what was known as a Christmas block. So like that was a tradition way back in my father and mother's time.
Isn't it lovely to hear her voice and hear her accent? I have a lovely recording of Bridget talking to me about Christmas, just at a Christmas tree a couple of years later on. But what I find in my area of work is what might be done in one parish or one village might be done in the next one. What might be done in one family might be done in a family down the road. So sometimes we assume that these traditions and customs are very particular to a certain area, or they mightn't exist in a certain area, but we don't know because we sometimes we don't ask, right? So that's always one thing I always keep saying to people: ask around. You have to be a little bit nosy in this job, right? We're in my area of work. This idea of actually gifting, sure, you can even see it yourself here. Look at this table here. Like I guarantee if you go to any towns here in the country, you'll have someone on the side of the road on the bonnet of a car selling holly, or maybe selling sticks with candles, or transitioning your projects to them. So this idea of the log and the stick is really important. But it's not just Ireland. So many of our traditions are cross-European, folks, right? Here was one thing some of you may have grown up doing. The youngest in the house will always light the candle on Christmas Eve. They'd light the candle usually at 6 o'clock, or usually when the sun went down, which might be a bit before it. But if you go right across Europe, you'll find that same tradition, especially in a lot of the Catholic and Christian communities, where that's very, 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 very strong. And one of the amazing things which I find now is in the last 20, 25 years in particular, we've had loads of new people living in Ireland. And it's amazing because our blinkers have come off with our connections to Europe, our connections through these things, through our mobile phones, through the way we connect through the advent of the internet. We can actually build up a bigger picture, joining up the dots, as I'm calling it scientifically. But that's a lovely thing to do as well. Neighbours that maybe from Poland are living beside you, guarantee you they will have similar traditions. So it's a very, very interesting time in this area of work. So fire has always been important, folks, always been important. And here was one thing as well. Sometimes we take the things we do, sometimes when we're looking at folklore, some people are wanting to go back to folklore they want to go back to the depths of time, and they want to go back to, I don't know. In some ways, there's almost trying to create different things, but sometimes folklore is playing out right in front of us. And one of the really, really strong traditions all over Ireland, as far as I can say, is the idea of leaving holly on the graves of Christmas, leaving a lit candle on the graves, especially for people who've lost parents or grandparents. Like I do it now. My own parents are gone, and my grandparents' parents are gone, but I know it's really strong, and I've found it from rural communities right to inner city Dublin. I was talking to 2 women from inner city Dublin who grew up on Dominic Street, and they would always walk out to Glasnevin to visit their parents' grave and leave holly. So you either do it in the lead up to Christmas on Christmas Eve, or maybe on Christmas Day, or maybe St. Stephen's Day, but definitely over that period, which is really important. Again, just a site, I snapped this photograph at a graveyard and in Enniscorthy, you know, it's full of solar lights. I don't care where you stand on solar lights, but the idea of keeping our dead close to us is very, very, very strong within Ireland. Very, very strong with it. You know, the idea that our dead are kept close to us and kept alive. Our memories of our dead are kept alive. And Christmas has always been important. We forget that sometimes. Halloween is important as well. But before I even go into the Irish kind of Christmas experience, and I guarantee you this is happening in Ireland as we speak, in about 3 days' time, it's St. Barbara's Day. And Halloween, our Christmas tradition, there's different layers. So sometimes there are different layers on top of each other, and you have to kind of strip them back a little bit. One tradition, which I suppose we all probably have now, where a lot of people will have, we should have a Christmas tree inside in your house. Now, I'll talk about people not having Christmas trees, or the idea of bringing something alive into your home. But across Europe, in southern Germany, and you get it in other pockets of Europe as well, there's a tradition of bringing in a slip of a slip of a cherry tree. But sometimes it can be, sometimes it can be hazel. Sometimes I've even come across whitethorn, which is an absolute no-no in Ireland. Whitethorn would never be brought into the house in Ireland, but it was, you find it there. But the most common one was a cherry tree. And St. Barbara's Day is on the 4th of December. And the classic folklore was, the story was that apparently when she was being brought off to be held, to be locked up, a piece of a cherry tree caught onto her collar or a shawl, and inside then it blossomed inside. I think it blossomed on the day of her death. But it's interesting to see this idea of bringing in a kind of a whitethorn. Again, for those of you who know, a whitethorn would never be brought into the house in Ireland. It'd be ran, because whitethorn was our hawthorn is what we would use for a maybush. It was the absolute no-no. But I've come across this in Germany, right? So just keep an eye out for that, because I find sometimes you will find your neighbors who may be from Germany, or your neighbors who may be from Poland now these days, will actually be doing these traditions. So that's an interesting one. So obviously then we have obviously the idea of the Christmas tree. And for those of you, this is I think it's a photograph from Germany. There's a few interesting things here that I want to show you. One is the idea of bringing something green into the house at that time of year. That was always important, right? The idea of having this light back to the St. Barbara's tree, and the thing, and the flower cherry, the cherry blossom flowering that day around Christmas. They said the idea of putting light and candles, you're going back a long way for those elements are there, folks. That's where you were. That's when, back to the times of men lying on stones and women lying on stones. So this idea of a Christmas tree with candles, exported from Germany to America to England to here, probably mid 1800s, and slowly became popular here. Now the gas thing is, I actually love this. You probably have somebody's at home, your candles on your trees, which for some people will still, I've came across people who still like candles on their trees at Christmas Eve, especially in mainland Europe. They will do it. Absolute health hazard, really, when you think about it. But this and that's neither here nor there. It's really interesting to remember these things from the 1980s and 90s. Before LEDs, we actually made our electric lights look like candles, but that's neither here nor there. But one thing, which I was born in 1975, and here's something that you might, some of you out there will remember this, and some of you won't, and be completely foreign to you. We have this notion that everyone in Ireland had a Christmas tree. And from my experience, my mother, my grandmother, older neighbours never had a Christmas tree. I was in Tipperary 2 weeks ago, according to the same women, never had a Christmas tree. And the Christmas tree only tradition, especially in country areas, only really, by and large, started to creep in the 60s, 70s, and then popularized them with artificial trees, and now there's a whole industry around it. So that's one thing that we take for granted. It was we assume. So it was always holly and ivy. They were the absolute primes within our Christmas experience in Ireland, was the holly and ivy, not the Christmas tree. I'm going to let you listen to the two voices of these two women, just so you can hear it from someone else saying it.
Do you remember years ago putting up a Christmas tree, or was there Christmas trees in your days?
No.
Not in our early days. When
No.
we got older, like we might go out and get a
Well,
bit of a holly tree, or you
we
had a
just-
few branches.
We just put up the holly and the
and the
decorations,
yeah.
the hoops, those ones on the roof. That's all I
Yeah.
remember. And balloons, we had some balloons. But we never had a Christmas tree.
So they never had a Christmas tree. And that's something I'd love you to ask again, for especially rural communities, ask about that. Did we ever have a Christmas tree? Which is really interesting, holly and ivy, because they were there. So what, the Christmas tree isn't there. It's part of my life here now. We've got young children. The Christmas tree makes Christmas for them. But still, I wouldn't go without holly and ivy. Here's an interesting little parallel to look at, actually. I just showed you the photograph there from Germany, the sketch of a white hawthorn tree. But between Ireland and Newfoundland, where Newfoundland is a huge population from the southeast of Ireland, went over late 1700s, early 1800s. And I've all got Wexford, Waterford, South Kilkenny accents still all over there. But here in Wexford, we do a lot. It's funny, there's crossover in different ways. Here at home, we put up, and I know in Clare, you do like you may be doing Maybow or the Mayflowers, but in Wexford and mostly a lot of eastern counties, actually that's one thing that you should always consider. A lot of our traditions, when they moved in from say from mainland Europe, and they would have hit the eastern counties first. And you would have moved slowly on over to the west, and then they would have changed or would have become something else as well. So we should never lose our sight with our connection to Europe, whether mainland Europe, whether it's England or Scotland or Wales as well, and that's those influences over. But here's the thing called we call it a May bush. It's a white thorn sometimes. This is a piece of gorse, and you put it up on May Eve to keep away the fairies, to keep away bad luck. And this is a white thorn version or a hawthorn version of it. Here's another bit of one. I don't know what it is, but the idea was that you'd put it up and you'd ward off evil, right? And it's really interesting because when the Irish went over to Newfoundland, they brought with them the Maybush tradition. And I was over there in 2019. I was over there again this year. But this is a woman called Catherine Conway in Point Land. She swears she never left Waterford. And they don't have white thorn like us. So they have the old thing which looks like a Christmas tree. And on the May Eve, what do? They put up their May bush. And the really interesting thing as well was, in our May bush tradition, we used to put little lit candles on it, biotin, and that's where the fire element was always really strong. Or we'd have bonfires. But on her May bush over there, what does she do? Or a May tree, she puts fairy lights. So it's really gas to see that kind of, I suppose if anyone arrived in Newfoundland, in this part of Newfoundland in May and saw this, to be asking, why is your woman got the Christmas tree stuck outside in the yard? But she doesn't. One thing as well which we want to bear in mind is, in 5 days' time, we have St. Nicholas Day. And again, this is a photograph of a family I know down in New Ross here in County Wexford. And again, I keep saying this to people, the family originally from Slovenia and from the Czech Republic. And our Christmas, our Santa will come out, when our tradition of always come on the 24th and the night and wake up, Santa will have left his presents on the 25th, the morning of the 25th. But for a lot of mainland European families, it's changing. There's different things change and different things happening for loads of reasons, which I won't go into here with you. But still, you will mark it, and it's lovely. I was invited down by this family to say just to look at what they do, and their tradition is on the 5th of December is to leave out their shoes and to leave out, and then St. Nicholas then will leave little presents for the children. Right, and it's lovely just to watch it again. Very, very simple. Chocolate bars, sweets, and it's really interesting for what is you get a spud. So basically, if you're bowled, you get a big spud, and if you're kind of semi-bowl, you get a few small spuds, right? And we had that tradition here as well. And again, our Scottish neighbours had the same as well. Sometimes spud, but it was usually coal, a lump of coal. If you're a bowl, you would be warned, and Santa would leave that for you, right? But it's a lovely tradition, and those things are happening in Ireland now in full colour. And that's one thing I suppose I want to stress to you as well. It kind of annoys me a little bit sometimes when people refer to folklore and think about black and white, and they go back to photographs taken in 1950, or they go back to an account from 1937 or 38, which are fantastic accounts to be able to go back to, and then they base everything on that rather than actually talking to someone who lives near them and actually watching what they do now, right? So I think I hope we can learn to be able to talk to people and be able to look at and observe what people do. Rather than just going back to resources and forming our opinions and our theories on that. Little Christmas was big. It's Little Christmas, as they call it, for St. Nicholas Day. It was very, very big across Europe, across Germany still. You have this figure called Krampus. I won't show you the film. Maybe I'll show you a little bit of it, right? It's a tiny film. It's a fantastic film from 1934 from Pate. And it's basically of this figure. Now in Germany still, there's a whole festivals, if any of you have ever been there, but this is a great 1940s recording. It's a bit more real. It's not as street theatery as what I see now. So it's basically a little play of these. Watch this. I'll let the film do the talking.
This is how the festival of St. Nicholas, from whose name our Santa Claus is derived, is celebrated in the village of Lienz, Austria. We see St. Nicholas in mitre and robes, attended by a number of devils in masks made at home, calling at a cottage. The mother brings her children forth. They piously make the sign of the cross, and she's able to give them name as good children. Each receives a present, apples or nuts or something or another. Just as they're going away, one of the children makes a long nose at the procession, and this bad boy is put into a basket on the back of one of the devils and carried off. Gilt twigs decorated with red ribbons are everywhere to be seen, representing the birch with which Santa Claus chastises bad children.
Now, if that wouldn't frighten you, I don't know what would, right? So that's how the Austrians do it, folks, right? But this idea of basically, if you don't do right, you there's a little robin looking. We have it in all our own folklore, even contemporary stuff. If you're not good, there's a little robin up in the tree, listen to you, and he'll tell Santa that you're not good. So this idea of good and bad and evil, it's right through our mummers' plays. It's right through so much of our Christmas stuff. And by the way, I just wanted to show it to you, this idea of calling and getting nuts and apples, it's almost identical to Halloween, identical to St. Martin's Eve, which was just gone there, the 11th of November. A lot of our European mainland traditions that we're part of start around, our starts at Halloween. The mainland Europeans start on the St. Martin's Day, which is the 11th, and they carry on right through to Lent. So a lot of our mum and traditions and a lot dressing up and calling to the neighbours are all part of that wider European tradition. But back to Ireland, back to County Wexford and back to County Clare, wherever you're from. One of the things that I grew up with, and so many as well, was we would always have to get berry holly at Christmas. And my poor old father would always know what trees to go to. He'd always know where to go to get enough and to be able to leave a bit there that that you would that you'd be able to call back next year and get a bit without butchering down a tree. And I suppose that's the sensibility of living in the country that you'd hope that people would have, is the idea of just kind of looking after things, and they will always be there for you then. But that was one thing that we always did, and my grandmother always did, and my father did, and I do with my own little ones now. We'd always go on Christmas Eve, we'd always get holly, and we'd always bring it in and put it over the picture frames. And there's a very simple reason why, folks. I suppose nowadays Christmas is starting to commercialize stuff since October, to be fair. It started now, people are using the late late show as they kind of the new date. Before it was when the country people, as the Dubs would say, went shopping on the 8th, or the townies would say, but us country ones going shopping because it was the feast of the Immaculate Conception. Wasn't it? Yeah, Feast of the Immaculate Conception on the 8th, which is a holy day. So the country people went in gawking at shops. So that was that date became, but that wasn't always there. That was only the 1940s, 50s, that date. That didn't go back to the depths of time. And one of the reasons, my own grandmother was born in 1912, and she'd always say, they'd always put the holly and the ivy up literally a day before it, right? A day before Christmas, or a day or two before it, because they said if you put it up beforehand, sure, it'd be dry. And it wouldn't last till Little Christmas, which was the 6th. And I suppose years ago, our houses weren't as warm as they are now, but that was the tradition. That was that kind of, the 12 days of Christmas were really, really important. Now we have this big lead up, and come here to me, if you're like me, it kind of breaks your heart. To me, the 12 days of Christmas are important, whether you're a Christian or whether I think so many of us now know that the layers of Christianity were built upon obviously previous layers, and it's still an important period within that within that calendar year for us in this part of Western Europe. Like Christmas or this marking of the light, the lowest, the darkest time of year, this turning point in the year does make sense. It makes sense. Our calendar days make sense. They make sense within our lives, especially with ones like yourselves when you grow up in the countryside, right? So that's what people did. They threw their holly up over picture frames, they threw them up over door frames, they used some decorating. There was a bit of red, there was a bit of green, there was a colour in the depths and darks of winter, and our houses weren't as bright as they are now with lights and big windows and everything else as well. So this was an important time of the year. It's really interesting as well, just even notice if you're making St. Bridget's Cross, or you put something, or a piece of blessed palm, whatever you're into, you put it on a height. It was always put on the height over the door, over the thresholds. They were always really important parts within the home, right? And one of the things which I suppose a big part of the whole Christmas experience was putting up a crib. Again, whether you're Christian or not, I suppose Christmas is big. The name is there. So the crib was always really important. And even things like where it was the youngest child in the house was given the job of putting baby Jesus in, or then putting in the boys, when the 3 wise men, when they come down 12 days later. But that was really important. And one thing which is really interesting to watch and I grew up with it here, and I've seen it in East Galway, I've seen it in Donegal, is this straw from the crib. The straw from the crib was absolutely very, very particular to us here in Ireland. And again, it's grown. It's not as popular in some counties as it was, right, as other counties, right? But where I grew up was, people would always take a piece of straw from the crib and you'd give it to someone. And you'd have this piece of straw from the crib and it was put into your purse. And it meant then that you would always have a little bit of luck. And you'd put it in after Christmas. Some people do it around Christmas Day, Christmas Eve. A lot of people I would know will wait just before the crib comes down on the 6th or the 7th and get it that last day then. And you'd put it in. Now the gas thing is here now, I'm not going to show you my bank cards, but I have a piece of straw here wedged in here beside the old Visa card, the old credit card, right? A lot of people now will have that as well. Again, come here, it's life insurance. And a lot of people would do it in different ways. I met one woman there in, where was she? In Offaly only a few weeks ago, and she had it that she said you put it under your mattress under the bed, so basically that you wouldn't get sickness. You'd replenish this every year. Another woman was telling me up in Galway, she put it in the car in the four corners of the house so you wouldn't have a fire in the house. So people use these different things for different reasons. Again, here's someone up in Carlow showing me how she puts it into her phone case, so she would always have a bit of luck. A lovely woman in Dublin told me this, and I've come across it since as well, is you get a piece of the straw from the crib. You'd also get a silver coin, which is your Hansel coin. I'll talk to you about that in a second. Hansel Monday, or to Hansel the child was the hand seller to give money. And that's very, very strong around the country. Right in the middle of Dublin, it's really strong. And this woman had it, said that you'd always get a bit of the straw, put it around your Hansel coin, and put sellotape on it and throw it into your purse, and said, no matter how desperate you could be for that €2, you will not sell that, or you not take apart that and use that. That's your luck money for the whole year, right? And the really interesting thing here is now this is that, again, when you talk to your neighbors here, I people from Poland, and they will eat carp, some will eat cod, some will eat salmon, but usually fish on Christmas Eve. And some of the older ones would tell me they used to always keep a piece of the scale from the fish and put it in their purse or their wallet, so they would have luck for the year. So there's loads and loads of crossover. We're not unique. We're not, God didn't create the Irish in a little island, you know. Sometimes we have this kind of a lot of kind of new age Celtic mythology kind of stuff, and you kind of it grits me a little bit, right? Because we forget we're connected, and I think there's more that connects us than divides us. So that's really an interesting part, is the whole idea of the straw. And again, sure, come here to me. Look at the course of the year, folks. People get blessed palm. They get we make our St. Bridget's crosses. We replenish them come the 31st of January, 1st of February. So there's always been this tradition of this kind of material, that kind of natural materials within our lives in the course of the year, whether it's a maybush or whether it's a piece of straw. I suppose we can't mention Christmas without mentioning this fella, and this is a cracking image from the National Library, and I think it's from around 1910, 1920. It's from the Clonbrook, the photography collection, and I came across it by accident because this figure is new to Ireland, and you know that in the bigger scheme of things. But this kind of figure that we know, this visual that we know, but isn't it lovely to see Santa's stick and his beard and his little kind of thorns with a holly on him, an ivy on him? I thought it's an absolutely gorgeous image. And one of the things, I suppose, you've just heard me say it there now, which I, exposed my pig ignorance here, is I grew up in the country, and we in our house, that man is called Santi. And in some other people's houses, he's called San Nicholas, and more people's is called Santa. There's no right or wrong. But I'm just going to let you listen to a couple of Dublin women here that are working on a new folklore collection. And I rarely work in Dublin, I'll be honest with you. I'm always all over the rest of the country. But I was blown away by the content that I was just blown away by. It was absolutely gorgeous. And it was a recording project, and I'm going to let you listen to the women now, because it's lovely to hear them, how they call Santi. And if I can find my own video files, I'd be a right fella altogether. And if I can't, I'm going to have to leave you. Santi name. Now, as you can see, I don't prepare I don't prepare PowerPoint presentations, because it depends on what I'm going to show and depending on what humor I'm on in. And no, they're not there. No, I can't see them. But all I can say to you is I'm going to pull back my images for you, is they called him Santi. All of it. Absolutely, right? Now, no right or wrong. But one thing that was absolutely lovely was, I asked, this is a lovely little exercise with folklore, because again, we take what we do, we assume everyone does the same as us, but here's even just something to plant in your own minds. For any of young children, where do your little ones post a letter to Santi? Did they burn their letters? Did they leave their letters out in a shoe or a boot? And everyone is different. Every house is different. I say the majority of people now due to on postal services and getting letters to the North Pole. People posted letters to the North Pole, but in the past times that people would have burnt them. So that's an interesting one as well. And again, just look at those little things that we do. Back at, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was a letter found, a child Santa letter was found up in a chimney in Limerick City. And it was just gorgeous, but it was from 1910 or 1912, something like that. Just a gorgeous little thing to find. And again, those little things that we do, which is really interesting as well, what we do, your Christmas stocking. Did Santa leave your presents at the end of the bed? Does Santa leave your presents under the Christmas tree? Or does Santa leave them stuck in your pajamas? Now, I've got 3 little girls, and in our house, we always stuck them into one of our pajamas or a jumper. And sure, obviously, in our house, my girls do the same now as what we do, what I ended up growing up doing. And they do that as well. So it's interesting. What we might do in one house might be very different in another house, and that's what's special, and that's what makes folklore interesting. What makes it interesting to be part of. Here's 2 women for you from County Mayo that are recorded back in 2007. And what's lovely was we all assume we all eat the spuds on Christmas Day, which most of us do. But they told me in this one little part of Mayo, they were saying, "By God, we didn't." But listen to those. Christmas Eve in Mayo and how it was different. And this is really interesting because this is very similar to mainland Europe, but it survived for some little reason in this little pocket of Mayo.
Christmas Eve, even though it was a fast day.
They'd fast during the day.
You'd have fast maybe during the day. And you'd have a big table, like a wedding table, then, and they all gather in for it. More so than Christmas Day, wasn't it?
Right. And others wouldn't go to visit on Christmas Day.
No, they never go to visit even yet.
No, in Paris.
Mm.
There was no such thing as presents on Christmas morning at all.
Oh, no.
Because the night before, and if you put a fire in your room that you hadn't, there might be bed in it, but you put a fire in it and there was a table in it, and that's where we had a lovely meal, And there was as much talk brought in for us and the duck and the goose the next day.
Yeah.
It brought in so that there'd be a big fire, that you wouldn't do anything on the Christmas Day.
Isn't that absolutely lovely to hear those women's accents as well? And what's lovely is there's loads of things there. I listen, I found hours, a silly amount of material that I've recorded over the years. And I listen back to those things and I hear things differently myself. I love the way one of the women used the word yet. If you heard that, you'll hear that still Irish people use that for still. So we do that yet, meaning we do that still. That's neither here nor there. But wasn't it lovely the way they spoke about Christmas? The meal was that night. And again, if any of you know French people here living here in Wexford, that's what they will do. So it's interesting in that part of East Mayo where that tradition survived. Within that couple of cluster family and villages, I've noticed that. Also, it's really interesting. Philly spoke about going out and bringing in enough turf because you wouldn't want to work on Christmas Day. Likewise, people years ago, and especially it was hard for women in particular, that to work really hard on Saturdays because you weren't supposed to do a tap on a Sunday. You weren't supposed to do knitting or washing or anything. It was a mortal sin if you were seen washing or hanging out clothes on a Sunday. So no work would be done on Christmas Day. So the turf was brought in, or the sticks were brought in our case, like back to the woman here in Wexford, or like back to the idea of having this big fire. And I suppose you had a big fire because, as the women were saying as well, you were cooking the goose, you were cooking the duck, whatever you had over the open fire. And again, that wasn't long ago. My mother grew up cooking on the open fire. Right, my grandmother cooked on the open fire. The gas cooker changed everything. Where you could go up to the village on a bike and get a cylinder of gas, changed absolutely everything. And when people got a gas cooker in the early 1950s into the 1950s, and again, people will talk to you about that. The idea of going. I remember a lot of people, the older people, will talk about going to mass by 8 o'clock, and you'd be fasting, you'd be hungry. And you'd go to mass, and be a big long mass, and then you wouldn't be home till 9:30, 10:15. You'd meet the neighbours on the road. You'd always wish them a happy Christmas. That was always the thing to do. And you'd come home then, and you wouldn't be sitting down for the 12 o'clock spuds because everything was cooked on the open fire. And you'd be lucky if you had 3. My own father said to me a couple of years before he died, he always said they were lucky if they had half a pig's head. And when you think of how flahoolap we are now, and you see the ads on television, when you see the spreads that people are putting on, and you see the stress that people create for themselves, when you think back to a much more simpler simpler time when people would have maybe one piece of meat and maybe 2 veg, and that's all you had because that's all you could cook on the arm of the open fire. If you had a range or something else, then you were better off. You could have a bit more, but that was, we should never lose sight of that. And we've come from absolutely from that level to into 5th gear up to a ridiculous percentage within a short number of decades. One lovely thing actually as well, I hope you're all okay and still with me. One of the lovely things, there's loads of magic around Christmas, obviously magic around Santa and Santa coming and presents, and there's no point saying it's not as a magic time. It is a magic time, and especially if you have children, and you can even remember back to your own childhood as well. But one of the lovely things that I always liked was this story, was it said that if you go out on a Christmas Eve, you'll always hear the animals were given the gift of speech. And again, that's what I've come across. The people over in America will have the same thing. A lot of them are they're kind of Christian tales, I suppose. I'm probably pre-Christian as well in some ways, if you strip them back. But the idea of hearing the animals would be kneeling down and talking. I just love the visual of it, you know. And I've recorded people who would tell you this for fact. And who am I to say to anyone that's not true? You know what I mean? You can make up your own opinions in your head of what you think of stuff. But to me, the story is a story, and the entertainment value of the story is there. And that's absolutely gorgeous as well. I just have listened to one woman here in Offaly telling me about the donkey kneeling down on Christmas Eve. Have a listen.
We used to walk on Christmas Eve to the shed when you had a farm. You went to the shed and you had a donkey. And the donkey kneeled down at 12 o'clock on Christmas Eve. Yes. Many Christmases when we were children, we'd always go out to see the donkey kneel down. And so he does.
Yeah. He kneels down the same as our Lord.
Yeah, at 12 o'clock.
12 o'clock night.
Isn't that just gorgeous, folks? And I love the accents. And what in one breath she says donkey, and next one she says donkey. We're donkey territory on this part of the country. I'm going to hopefully, if my other half, Aileen Lambert here, she's going to sing a carol for you. And I just want to pause and see she there 1 second. And she's coming here, folks. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to introduce you to Aileen, who's going to tell you about a particular carol here.
With a lovely introduction there, Mick.
Thanks a million.
Hello, everybody, wherever you all are. And my name is Aileen, and I'm a singer of traditional songs. We have quite an unusual one here that's known as the Enniscorthy Carol. It was collected in the early 1900s by an organist in the cathedral in Enniscorthy. And actually we did a lovely recording there a couple of years back where I sang the song in the cathedral, which of course, lovely resonance in terms of the acoustics, and also I suppose the resonance of the fact that it was the organist that that had collected this song. So it was collected from a local singer. His name is forgotten, but so it's a carol that's just tells the scene of the nativity, really. So I'm just going to sing a couple of verses of it for you, and Mick could direct you or tell you a little bit about the video if you wanted to hear the whole song. So, good people, all this Christmas time, consider well and bear in mind what our good God for us has done in sending his beloved Son. With Holy Mary we should pray to God above this Christmas day. In Bethlehem upon that morn, there was a blessed Messiah born. Near Bethlehem did shepherds keep their flocks of lambs and feeding sheep, to whom God's angels did appear, which put the shepherds in great fear. Prepare and go, the angel said, to Bethlehem, be not afraid. For there you'll find this happy morn, a princely babe, sweet Jesus born. Oh, thank you. I'll
Brilliant.
let you back to Mick. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Aileen. That was, we just planned just before we came out for you. So I hope you enjoyed that. Lovely. So if it's okay with yourselves, we'll go on. Aileen was, we'll just, we're giving you a run through of some of the Christmas stuff. By the way, that song now has been, I've seen it on TG Carr. TG Carr did great stuff over Christmas, and I heard was being translated into Irish. We have a very unusual carol tradition here in Wexford, by the way. Kilmore carols, the Wexford carols now, and now there's a new group of Inniscarty carols. So again, the carol tradition again came in from over west, come in from Europe, sorry, over east. Here's one thing which you'll be no stranger to in County Clare. The Bococks, as some of you may call them, the Ranboys, the Colliacks, we call them here. There's different names for them. But this idea of dressing up and mumming, the wider mumming tradition started at Halloween and went right through that whole winter period. It made absolute complete sense, and finished on Easter, finished Easter here. But St. Stephen's Day was always a big thing. And St. Stephen's Day, neighbours would get dressed up, and here's us getting dressed up where we live in a rural part of Northwest Wexford, and it's done in pockets around the country, where you'd bring the ran out, and the same way as Halloween, you'd bring the ran out, you'd have to eat it, you call to your neighbours, and you'd get something, you would bring the dead bird out. In this case, was Big Bird or from Sesame Street. But some people years ago, I've recorded people who in Kildare, or again, you don't have to go far in your own part of the country, in County Clare, where people would have brought out maybe a little ornamental bird. In the past, lads would have actually caught birds, which is absolutely dreadful to think about it now. But that was done. It wasn't really wasn't as popular as people said it was. Some people would actually get a little feather and put a little feather, to find a little feather on the ground and put it in a matchbox and bring it out. So it depends on where you went. So it was lovely. It's always a lovely thing to do. There's us during the daytime, going out at nighttime. Big ones went out, small ones went out. And was a really interesting one. This is from Kerry down in County Limerick. And someone sent me this video. This is, I suppose, the amazing thing about it's armchair folklore collection in some ways, that I have a friend down in West Limerick, and she goes, "I've got a great video for you, Mick," or someone who's involved in the Renboys down below there will send this video to me in a sofa in Wexford. Next minute, I'll edit it up and put it together, maybe with a video from Clare or a video from Donegal. So it's an amazing thing that's happening with technology. But this was from last year. This was from a video from Margaret O'Sullivan. But it's interesting that every year, it always breaks my heart a little bit, I'll be honest with you. The RT go down to Dingle every year, and usually they have a great parade down there, and a great turnout down there, and it's really strong there, and I'm not knocking it, but it happens in every other part of the country. And maybe they've got better representation there, better reporters there, but I could bring you up to the back of Bunclody here, and our local traveller community, they go hunting around. They go hunting around every single year. And it's only people like myself who are on the ground who record that, right? So I suppose those kind of things are changing a little bit. But one thing to watch out for, this is what's the uniform these people are wearing, right? There's a very strong, these are our Wexford mummers. These are Renboys. There's a lot of our traditions, this kind of costume, you'll find it would cross over from Wales, from England, and you'd find it in other parts of Europe as well. But from Wales and England, there's definitely crossover there. You'll see crossover. There's one crossover you see in Kerry at St. Stephen's Day. They have this horse's head, and again, you find it in Wales and you find it in the English West Country, right? So there's layers of movement to tradition, maybe through the Cambro-Normans, the Anglo-Normans, even to look back at those old maps, in parts of North Kerry was very heavily populated by Cambro-Anglo-Normans. So sometimes the notion of who we are can shift slightly when you go looking at the facts, right? And these are photographs from a tape from the schools, from the National Folklore Collection. Again, there's a bit of costume, bit of Mardi Gras, but a very strong militaristic cap. There's always a captain in a lot of the Renboy groups. And here's again our boys here in Wexford, our mumming things, crossover between Morris dancing and kind of mumming plays. And I could talk to you about mumming plays for a whole hour on its own. No bother about mumming plays like the Ran, the King of a Bird, St. Stephen's Day, she was cutting the birds up at the kettle, down with the pan, give me some money to bury the Ran. Then you'll have loads of verses. One of my favorites actually was from Ron Kavanagh. Ron Kavanagh did an absolute brilliant version of the Ran there. If you ever get a chance to hear it, Ron since left us. But one of the really interesting things I showed you earlier on was the crossover over to north to the state, not to the States, over to Newfoundland, over to Canada, and again where these people from the southeast of Ireland and from parts of West Kerry went over, and they brought with them the Ranboy tradition. Now they brought with them the Christmas foods and the Christmas mummers, i.e. people dressing up, calling to neighbours, because on St. Stephen's Day you'd know that the neighbours might have a bit of food in, you might have a bit of drink. It was a great social gathering, exactly like Halloween, right? And this is a great sketch based on a photograph from Grant Boland's. And if you see the kids are actually have a little tree, because they don't have the furze bush like we do, but they have a little bird up on top. If you notice there, you've got a little bird, a little ram on top, and they call it St. Stephen's Day as well. And so there's a man called John Ryan telling me about it. I'll let you listen to his voice for a second. When John's accent has changed slightly compared to, but he is an absolute clear memory of the Ranboys in Riverhead, this part of St. Mary's Bay.
Well, and St. Stephen's Day, like all the young boys in the community, young men, would early in the morning, we'd all get together and we would do what we call the Ramboys, go out with the Ramboys. Now, it was only the boys. And of course, you know, if you were too young, you wouldn't be old enough to go. And once you got so old, you would stop doing it. But it was a very formal thing. And like, you know, we weren't the first people of my generation weren't the first to do it, like my father and my grandfather's people and so on. They all had done it before.
Stop it there, but absolutely clear memory. And here's the gas thing. Here's a little video for you. Sent to me there. Then the kids get sweets. So I'm going to let you watch that again. If you can see it's a little hole in a little tree, little bird stuck to it, calling out to neighbours to get sweets. Identical to our Christmas tradition. Identical, right? Here's the classic thing which you will see. Kind of, it's more. Would be associated more with weddings. You'll notice yourselves in Clare, particularly in West Clare, of the costumes of the straw boys for weddings in particular. And again, I always want to keep pointing out that we're not alone. The idea of dressing up and using this very, very strong for weddings more so. But here's a still from videos from Poland. Friends of mine sent me, right? Identical costumes. These boys are all from Lent. These are all from Easter traditions, right? But identical kind of costumes. The straw hats are that part identical. This one here, identical to what you see here. So our blinkers are off a little bit with regard to folklore and customs. Here as well, we do obviously the tradition of dressing up and acting the Aegis and covering your face so no one to know you on St. Stephen's Day or Halloween. And again, Newfoundland again, St. John's, they have a Mummers Festival over there, dressing up, putting on things, men dressing up as women, women dressing up as men. There's a great word actually to call them over there, not really common, but in some communities they call them the unchocks. And you'd be lads over there recording this, don't know what it means. Sure, if any of you know what a nunchuck is, you know what a nunchuck is. Sometimes it's a reference to a female fool, but in general it can be used for a female or a male fool here. You'll have place names with unchuck in them, but straight from here. But our tradition of dressing up is part of the wider European tradition. Here's dressing up here, gugging for eggs at Easter. And again, you go looking for eggs in Finland and northern Sweden as well. Similar traditions. I hope I'm okay for time at all. I'm looking at the clock. Actually, one thing we were there was these are stills, by the way. That's a still from Holland. Children carving turnips. People in the Isle of Man carving turnips at Halloween, and children out at St. Martin's Day in Holland with things. One thing I guarantee if you ask your neighbours, I was showing you the candle that was lit on Christmas Eve. A lot of older people said to me they would use carved turnips. I know turnip now is associated with the Halloween story, but turnips were also used. Some people said, oh, we put a little piece of crepe paper over. Actually, a woman from Clare was telling me that they used to use a turnip to hold their candle in. Christmas, funny, New Year's Day. We come through Christmas then, folks, and I'll come to the end with you, right? I hope is New Year's is there a little bit with us. There's things like New Year's Day. It's not as big as it's made out to be. Simple things where you might open, if you had two doors, you'd open the back door to let the old year out, and the new year to let the new front door to let the new year in. That was we find that in a lot of cities and towns, and you find it in our neighbours over in Scotland and England as well. There's not people might wish neighbours good luck, but one thing which was really strong. Wish neighbours good luck on a New Year's Day. You might do that, but one of the really strengths, and you'll find it to this day, the first Monday of the year is always called Hansel Monday. And Hansel Monday, you're supposed to gift a child usually some money. You'd never pay bills on Hansel Monday. You talk to older people around the country. If you give away anything on Hansel Monday, you'd be giving away your luck for the year. And it comes from I think it's Middle English, from hand sell. It's a hand deal where you put something into the hand. The women in Dublin were telling me they'd give bread and money. Bread and money was always a thing, you'd give it to them. Some of the women were telling me the relations in England, and they'd always give them, even the children who could be born and bred in England, when they were over visiting, they'd give them bread and money. Hansel Monday was a really important date. Other little things as well, you wouldn't throw ashes on Hansel Monday. That was one you'd find around the country. Again, I can only talk about traditions that I hear from people, not from me going searching the school's folklore scheme, right? Just from what people will tell you. And what's amazing now is what's lovely, I don't have time to show you now, but I can put on a video there, you know, of a woman telling me about giving Hansel and how she'd Hansel her child's her children on that day. So it's a really important day. The first Monday of the new year was Hansel Monday. I suppose you would have the carols would happen here. They would have carols starting on Christmas Eve, and they'd go through the whole course of Christmas to the 12 days of Christmas. That were really, really important. New Year's was big. It's big now. It wasn't historically big here, as big as it was as we think it was. It wasn't at all. But the biggest kind of finale I found in the 12 days of Christmas was you come to the 5th and then you come into the 6th. And one of the things, which is really unusual one, I've come across it in Westmeath and East Galway. And it's been recorded before, but I've come across it in practice, was on Christy. No, I'll go into it even before I call it Nullig Naman for I grew up calling it Little Christmas. Some people call it Old Christmas, and some people call it Nullig Naman, and there's no right or wrong. It's just whatever you call it, right? But on the 5th of January was the kind of the end. That's when that was when the 3 wise men came and they brought all their gifts. But I've come across this tradition of lighting 12 candles on Little Christmas Eve, as we call it. And now this is weird, folks. And in some ways, it looks wrong, right? But this image was sent to me by a man from up in Athenry a couple of years ago. And you would literally, family in the house, you light these little small 12 tapered candles, tiny candles, and you would pick your candle and you'd light them all and you'd watch them. And you'd watch them and watch them and watch them in the hope that your candle would not burn out. Because if your candle burnt out, now wait, this is the fun part, folks. It said that you were going to not live by the end of the year. Now, I can understand why that game never took off, but I'm actually came across people who still do it. Now, they mightn't do it now in the same way that their parents did it or their grandparents did it, but they did it. Now, in some ways, if we look back at our Halloween traditions of putting of the objects we use for the future of the child, from clay to water to sticks, you'd probably, you can change them now as well, but due to our lives. If I had 1 second, I'd just let you listen to this one woman from Offaly again. Just have a little listen. I won't get a chance to show you any of these kind of stuff. Have a listen to this. Now, this is incredible.
About a week before Christmas, they get a cow dung, a big one, right? And they let it dry. Put it in turf shed or whatever, and let it dry. And you'd have these thick rushes, the bull rushes we call them. When you get those, you get 12 of them, and you oil them. And on Little Christmas Eve at 6 o'clock, it would be put on a sheet of paper, the cow dung, and all the rushes would be all put around, 12 rushes, right? And they'd be lit, and everyone kneeled around the table, children, parents and all. And my mother or my father would give out the rosary for 6 o'clock in the evening. And they'd burn away, and it had the rosary said. Again, they'd be burned. I've one that it was lit straight away. But they didn't generally because they burned away with the oil. So that was all about Little Christmas. And my own father was born on Little Christmas.
Let's stop her there. I have a lovely woman from Westmeath telling me what she remembers of the game part of it as well. But Westmeath, Offaly, East Galway, that little pocket around the country, it's interesting. But the next day is Nullig Naman, Women's Christmas, Old Christmas, Little Christmas, the different names on it. But by and large, and any women who are listening here now will know that women didn't have a day off. My mother, God be good to her, never had a day off, and to my own guilt, because my father couldn't peel a spud or boil a spud. And like a lot of men, whatever. And I just literally went into the school's folklore scheme, and I know the spellings are slightly different. This is not an accurate reflection, but by and large, people did most people called it Little Christmas in Ireland. If you go from the 37-38 period, that's what it was. Now that's changing now. I suppose if you ask people now, that will have changed. But very, very Nullig Demand, very, very strong. The idea that women would call around and socialise and have a drink or a chat. A powerful concept, and you can see why it's why it's become so popular. But I just know that in my own case and women like that, it was always called Little Christmas, is what you refer to it. And at the end, it was 12 days. It was to do with shifting the calendar dates and loads of other things as well, which I won't go into here. But here was one thing which is really an interesting one. It was also the sign. Little Christmas on Nullig Demand was a sign that you would take down the decorations, and that's, I suppose, putting the end of Christmas. And I know my own mother at home they would always keep the Christmas holly as children. That was always done when they cooked on the open fire. Everything was done on the open fire. You would keep the Christmas holly and you would burn it, and you'd burn it on Pancake Tuesday. That's when it was used. It was used to light the fire on Shrove Tuesday. And on Shrove Tuesday, there was one thing you did. You gave up using all your eggs and all your hens. You let your hens set, and your hens, didn't eat any eggs over the course of Lent, because that was the start of Lent. And then come Lent, you would, this is going to end with this now, come Lent, so basically use up all your eggs on Shrove Tuesday. You didn't eat eggs until Easter Sunday. And Easter Sunday, the girls here in Wexford in particular would always keep up their eggshells, and keep up their eggshells then, and they didn't hang them on their May bush on the 1st of May to 31st of April. And it's funny, you see these little fine threads and links that connect so many of our dates. And I suppose I could talk to you about the summer one another day, but not right now. So listen, I'm going to end my presentation with you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And one thing I'm going to say to you, and I'll get out of your hair, I won't keep you any longer. If you do like what I do, is I produce this thing called the Irish Dresser and Folklore Calendar, and it's the only plug I'm going to do this evening on you, right? And basically it is a project, because I work across into the area of art and folklore. That's my area of work, very, I suppose, a visual approach to folklore. And it's basically fantastic stories about dressers from all over the country, because I love that kind of that vernacular. But if you're interested in the folklore dates, I pencil in all the folklore dates. When to take down your May bush, when Nullig Demand is, when whatever it is, when make pancakes, whatever it is. So those dates are there. And if you want to get a copy, you can buy a copy at thedresserproject.ie, thedresserproject.ie, and they're €15, and I'll post them to anywhere in Ireland. It's free postage in Ireland. And that's my only plug for this evening. So I hope you enjoyed listening to me talking.
Oh, Michael, thank you so much. What a treat. I don't even know where to start. And songs in the middle. We just have been absolutely honoured, I think, to hear that. Really, really informative and also interesting, and asking those questions about, where these traditions really come from and the things that we kind of assume, and maybe the reality not always being the case. We've 1 minute. If anybody is really quick and has a burning question that they're dying to get answered, we can answer it. And other than that, I'm going to share Michael's website for the calendar, and also the Burn Bio website. So if people wanted to two great Christmas gifts there, tick a few things off your list. Actually, the tradition of gifting, is there anything on that? Is it just
Jenny Mac? Yeah, I suppose it is, like, but very, very simple. Very simple. If you even think back to that film in Austria, it was only like nuts and apples, and even when you talk to the older people, you're talking about, come here, an apple and an orange, and they weren't exaggerating that they were excited to get an orange as a child, that kind of way. When you consider where we've come from, and if you think back at the early stills I showed you of that family from the Czech Republic in Slovenia down in New Ross 4 or 5 years ago, and the little bag of sweets compared to what, so
yeah, puts it all in perspective. Absolutely. I think we're looking like we are finishing up for the evening, so we might leave you at that. And thank you so much, Michael, and thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see some of you again on our webinars in the new year. And other than that, have a lovely Christmas, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks all.
Thanks a million, folks. Take care. Thanks a
Bye.
million.
Good night.